Welcome to the Zoomosphere in what we are calling the Creative Campfire, which is a series of conversations with artists across the state of New Hampshire and artists who come from all regions of our state and do many different things. The goal today is to put these people in conversation and give an audience an opportunity to learn about their practice and also what they've been doing, inventing, innovating, and thinking over the past year and beyond. We are joined here today with Vivian Beer, give a wave, whoop, Jason Torres.
Hey, everyone.
Yay, Sarah Anderson.
Hey, everybody.
And Sarah Duclos. And I am supported by, I always call them the mothership, the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts. And the director, Ginny Loopy, is here acting as support and spiritually, emotionally, financially, and in an advocacy sense. Yes. And the rest of her colleagues here, the people who make us tick here in the state, are here supporting us as well. Ginny is going to help monitor the chat and questions and also disseminate some information about each of our guests.
Thank you, Amanda, and thanks everybody for being here. It's so good to see such a large group.
So we're going to start by getting to know our artists. And Sarah Anderson, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask Sarah a series of questions. These are rapid fire questions, in which she's going to answer to tell us a little bit about herself and her practice. Sarah, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, amazing. What is your full name?
Sarah Alcott Anderson.
And where are you in New Hampshire?
Exeter, New Hampshire.
Do you make your work in Exeter, New Hampshire?
Yes, I make my own work. I make anywhere as a poet.
Great. And what discipline or form does your art take?
Well, I write poetry, and I also, along with my husband, run an arts venue in Exeter.
And what is that called?
The Word Barn.
Awesome. 3 words to describe your process.
As a writer, my process, I would say, persistent in relation to the editing process. I would say fluid, and I would say starting to be experimental.
Tell us briefly about a new piece or process you are working on.
Well, I just did a month-long challenge. I'm not finished with it, where I actually have to write a poem every day and send it to 8 other people. And just that, being forced to do that and to produce work, not necessarily great work, but sometimes it's a revision, sometimes it's a new poem. Being on the spot like that is, I've produced some poems that sort of surprised me. So that's how I would, that's the newest thing that I'm doing. I also have a book coming out in the summer or in the late spring, my first book. So I'm very much actively revising and getting ready for that.
Excellent. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Name an artist that inspires you.
Sally Mann, the photographer.
Name one thing that's on your bucket list.
Ooh. I would like to go to Iceland with my husband and children.
Amazing. Thank you, Sarah. That's awesome. Jason, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Great. Your full name.
My full name is Jason Peter Tours.
And where are you in New Hampshire?
I'm currently in Littleton, New Hampshire.
And do you make your work there?
Yes, I do.
And what is the discipline or form your art takes?
It's changing at the moment. Right now, I'm into playing the drums and the guitar at the same time, if you can imagine it. But this year is taken, the form of painting, painting on leather, stenciling, signs. I feel like I've been a lot of different places all at once. Now I'm back at music.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate, definitely.
Yeah. A recent piece or process you're working on?
Well, the recent piece that I finished was for the RPM challenge, which is a recorded challenge. It's a music thing that every year, the month of February, is to create a piece of music that is either 10 tracks long or 35 minutes. And I recently completed it. And so that was kind of a challenge. I had never done it before. So that was a first for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Name an artist that inspires you.
An artist that inspires me right now is Rahsaan Roland Kirk, who is a famous jazz horn player from the 60s, 50s, and 60s. He was blind and he played like up to 6 or 7 different horns at the same time.
Cool. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What is one thing on your bucket list?
One thing on my bucket list is to go to South Korea.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah D.
That's me.
Sarah, what is your full name?
It is Sarah Elizabeth Duclos.
And where are you in New Hampshire?
I'm in Gonick, New Hampshire, which I'll explain because almost no one knows where that is. It's a town that is under the governorship of Rochester, so in the southeast corner of the state.
Do you make your art there?
Sometimes I make most of my art in Portsmouth and Kittery, Maine.
Process or product?
Ooh, younger me would have said product. 38-year-old me says process.
Coffee or tea?
Most days coffee, but I do appreciate a good tea.
Great. 3 words to describe your process.
Collaborative, multidisciplinary, and movement.
Awesome. What's a recent project you're working on?
I recently finished my first dance film during COVID, which I'm pretty proud of. And that was a collaboration with Anthony Boonpacoom, and who's a hip hop dancer in Portsmouth. And that was part of New Hampshire Theater Project's Tiny Mayhem series.
Amazing. Name an artist that inspires you.
Twyla Tharp, who is a choreographer who has worked in film, stage, musical theater, site-specific. She's done it all and did it all in a sea of men. So I adore her.
Amazing. What's one thing on your bucket list?
Ooh, I think one thing on my bucket list would be to present at APAP.
Ooh, which is a presenters conference that usually is held in New York City for performing artists, dance and theater primarily. Awesome.
Thank you for explaining that.
Thank you, Sarah. That's awesome. Vivian.
Yes.
Yay.
I'm ready.
What is your full name?
Vivian Powers Beer.
Where are you in New Hampshire?
I'm in Pembroke, New Hampshire, right on the Concord border.
And do you make your work in Pembroke?
I do.
Cool. And tell me the discipline or forms that your art takes.
Furniture and sculpture.
Cool. 3 words to describe your process.
I've been thinking about this one. Industrial, emotive, and functional.
Sparkly or shiny?
Sparkly.
Awesome.
Guys.
What's a recent piece you're working on?
I'm super excited about, I'm in the design process for a very significant piece in the brick market development in Portsmouth, which is going to, in large part, be a memorial to Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Awesome. Name an artist that inspires you.
The potter Roberto Lugo.
Awesome. What's one thing on your bucket list?
Going to a Lizzo concert with Amanda Wentworth.
And what are you going to grow in your garden this summer?
Oh, probably just dirt because I'm going to be too busy. Weeds. Too busy
Nice.
for gardening this year.
Amazing. Thank you. Awesome. So, artists, I'm going to pose a question to you to start us off in conversation. Feel free to unmute yourself to answer that and also to reply to each other. So this can roll informally and in ways that we need it to roll. Okay. I want to know, have you adopted new ways of communicating or making during the past year? Sarah Anderson, you just unmuted.
Yes. Sorry about that. As far as new ways of making and communicating as far as poetry, I would say just personally kind of adapting to being okay with a Zoom poetry reading and actually discovering, and I mean as an attendee, discovering that there is a certain, there's an intimacy to that actually you don't get in person in a strange way, and really kind of trying to adapt and adjust and not assume that it's a less than experience, you know. Of course, we'd rather be all together, but in the meantime, if I had a choice, I would choose some kind of connection. So I think as a poet, I've had the chance to do that a few times. I've had the chance to run a few Zoom poetry readings as well as attend. And, you know, seeing people I know at the readings, and there's just kind of a sense of community that can definitely be formed on Zoom. So I'm actually, as much as I'm tired of Zoom, and I teach using it often, but it's such a helpful tool. So that's what I would say as far as writing. And then as far as our venue, the Word Barn, we definitely had to pivot, and we had to kind of be creative. You know, like many and all venues, we had to shut down last March, and that was, you know, a full probably 80 events planned for the year that were canceled, and, you know, and all the artists reeling from that experience as well. And we did things immediately, such as I turned my in-person writing workshop into a Zoom workshop called Time to Write at Home. It's usually just called Time to Write. My husband, Ben, went out into our yard and built a stage pretty much in one day, and just said, let's do this. Let's have an outdoor venue. And so we call it the Word Barn Meadow. And it has professional lighting and sound, and, you know, it's a real stage. And that we had concerts. He organized concerts all summer and fall. And so that felt like we were doing something different, but still on our property. And people slowly kind of became comfortable. And then it was something I think people looked forward to, maybe their only social moment in the week, potentially for some people. He also ran his comedy series online with Josh and Sarah Day. They had been doing comedy in person in our barn. And even that worked really well. I know people who who, that was the thing they looked forward to on Friday night. So to sit down on Zoom comedy. And then most recently, the Makers series, which is something that Ben also started and has been organizing, and it's featuring, we've had everything from mixology to baking to fermentation to songwriting. And there's a playwriting workshop coming up this Sunday at 3 p.m. with the playwright Don Zolidis. So we have all of that on our website, but it's been, challenging but fun to sort of readjust. I hope my answer wasn't too long.
It's great. Interesting. It's interesting too, because you are running a venue and also reckoning with your practice. And there's layers, obviously, to the experience that you're trying to do when you have to invite the public in to continue to keep a venue alive. So that's really interesting. How about the rest of you? What's happening, right? What are new ways of working or thinking?
I think
I
that,
can go.
oh, go for it.
Go ahead, Jason. You talked first.
Right. Similar with Zoom, I actually find it to be a little bit more of a easier way to communicate directly with people. And that's something I didn't really use very much beforehand. I do work for a musician in New York City, in Brooklyn, Tim Byrne. He has a record label called Screwgun Records. We transferred everything over to Bandcamp. And he started taking advantage of the Bandcamp Fridays, where they waive the Bandcamp 10% fee. And early on the pandemic, there was a ton of activity for him on his Bandcamp page, and I ended up hosting sort of a round table with him and another guitar player named David Torn. And so just sort of facilitating, connecting people, artists with fans on Zoom. And then, in my own practice, my venue, the Loading Dock, pretty much, went into hibernation, similar to Sarah. We stayed in hibernation and didn't really translate to a digital experience. But what I did find was that there are lots of sound-related websites like Soundtrap and BandLab, where you can record stuff into your browser and then share it with different folks from anywhere, really, as long as they have an internet connection, and they can collaborate on music that you're working on, sometimes in real time, which was really exciting. And I can pop in an example track that I created with a friend of mine from Skidmore, Joe Hayes, and some other folks. And I created the video as well for it. I'm a visual and audio person. Those two things in my brain are fused. So if I make music, I'm always thinking about visuals. So, you can keep that in mind when I do it. But I also like to play around with found video sources and tweaking things and making things glitch out. That's sort of my own interest at the moment. But definitely using the digital tools that we have available to us to enhance creativity has been a big change for me.
Cool. Sarah D.
Yeah. So I didn't make a lot of work initially in the past year, but I was doing a lot of teaching over Zoom. And if it wasn't explicit, if you didn't see it in my bio on the side, I mostly work as a dancer and choreographer. I do that for theatrical productions as well. And like This Much Music. And of course, that is a big shift to like step away from, a place where people presenting work in places where people can gather. But in terms of teaching, I had a lot of fun teaching classes online and kind of thinking about, okay, how can I make this an interesting experience for my students? And I delved into using viewpoints, which is like a system of creating dance for, or movement rather, for theater and dance. And I thought, okay, well, how can I use viewpoints when students are at home? And it was actually so much more interesting to watch. In viewpoints, you assess your environment and you use what's around you to create movement that fits the environment. And the choreography that the students created was so much more interesting in a room that had stuff in it versus like an empty studio or, you know, a rehearsal hall. So that was really fun to facilitate. And then the second thing that I would say is, I mentioned a project that I did earlier with my friend Anthony, which was the film Hard Times that I made for Tiny Mayhem. And what was really cool about that was, you know, I'm a freelancer. So during a normal year, my schedule is really booked. Like, it's nice work if you can get it. I make sure that I have like teaching, and I'm doing a musical, and I'm, you know, doing a concert dance piece and a commission, or working with a museum, or whatever comes my way. I'm taking it to fill my schedule. Suddenly I had all of this free time. And that opened up a little bit of space for a new collaboration. Anthony and I had known each other online, but had never really met in person. We just kind of followed each other's work. He's primarily a hip hop dancer. I have more of like a ballet, jazz, modern dance background. So we kind of mashed our styles together to create something new. And that was also a bit of a creative leap as well, because I've done some facilitation of like group choreography, but I think working with one other person exclusively is definitely a different vibe when you're creating something. And so I went into it like a little like, ooh, am I going to be able to like release control of everything here and be able to make something? And we did, and it was awesome. And also working with film, I've wanted to do a dance film for so long, but there's a lot that goes into that, and having the packed schedule that I usually do, it's not something that I've had time to play with and explore. And now it's become a necessity, and it's something that I want to do more of.
That's cool. Awesome. Yeah, Vivian, how about you?
I feel like I may be an outlier on this one, and that my work isn't inherently collaborative. You know, I could like drown in 1,000 hours of grinding and never have enough not talking to anybody. But that's not my personality, which is really interesting. I feel like the balance between what you need as a human being and what you need as a maker can be quite opposite. And I feel like I'm not sure I've been successful in new communication in the last year, but I do have some observations and kind of directions that I've been thinking about. Sarah Anderson, you were talking about having that poetry challenge, right? And I've been trying to use my social media to create accountability for myself, because I think that sort of accountability to others, which I got from traveling and lecturing and, you know, visiting universities, going to conferences, that sort of biofeedback that I think of as accountability of like, hey, I'm pushing forward, I'm making new things, and I can feel the feedback from my peers, is something that's completely missing, because that's something I got in person through travel. So I've been trying to figure out how to do that with my social media to try to dismantle the training that I have from my age and from my generation, that I need to pack perfect content for that, and rather use it as a more casual interchange the way I think younger generations are approaching social media. So I'm working on it. But I feel like I have to unlearn a lot and create vulnerability in a space that is very uncomfortable to be vulnerable within. And that's really challenging, but it is, I think, an opportunity as somebody that, really doesn't have built-in collaborative experience, the setup to create, again, that accountability. Like Sarah, I'm sure it was really exciting to have somebody be like, so where's your stuff?
That's interesting. Social media has become a really almost like a lifeline and a storybook and a window, right? There's all of these things. A tool, but I think something that can also be misused, right? So that's been a really interesting landscape as we've all been thrust into it. One of the things that I've recognized for my own self is that I existed inside a lot of noise. And what I mean by noise is a lot of different projects or tasks or things that I needed to do or piled onto my plate. And inside of this past year, because everybody was slowing down, there was a permission to close off some of that noise. And it's made me think a lot about what I want to keep and what I want to hear, like to bring back in. What's that been like for all of you? Are there things, you don't have to name them, but have you established priorities for your own making or your own venues that you feel more compelled to grab hold of rather than putting a lot on your plate? Jason?
I definitely I feel that same sentiment, that there was a lot of noise in my life before this time last year, and focusing in on my own sort of artistic path and process was a result of that. That I had to more or less shut down my music venue, and running a music venue is no joke. I mean, you got to put up posters and booking and lots of looking at calendars and all of that kind of noise. And at first I was like, oh wow, this is great, I get a chance to really dive into my own stuff again. And there was a lot of it almost seemed like a vacation from normal life, and that vacation just sort of stretched. And so I did find that I went in a lot of different directions, and where I am now is sort of fully embracing the side of me that is interested in experimentation with sound and sound and vision, but and how those two things intersect and align, and how our brains want to make them align. Like the playing Dark Side of the Moon with the Wizard of Oz at a certain time. There's probably a term for it, but I love that connection where folks want things to line up, and trying to set certain situations so that those things do. So combining a programmatic approach to improvisation, let's say. And one thing that I'm working on a lot right now is improvising with the drums, and improvising in a non-linear way. So it's not with regular beats, but with a lot of different beats potentially going at the same time, and kind of trying to remove myself from the process of playing the drums, but while obviously still playing the drums, and trying to let the feeling of creativity flow through me, but not in a way that I'm like, oh, kind of like, meditating with purpose. It's more of just sort of like emptying my mind and just sort of listening, almost like I'm not a part of my body, and listening to what's happening. And instead of changing one like little thing, I'll just think like sort of programmatically, well, it's like, okay, maybe I'll switch my feet. Or maybe I'll try putting, something else in my hand, or, doing a different set of, types of things, setting up situations where I can make something that doesn't sound good, but then maybe out of that feeling of, it sounds like something that Vivian was talking about, out of that feeling of things not sounding good, then you sort of arrive at a new way to make sound or make something that is a little bit more unique.
I can jump in on that one as well. Mine is sort of two parts. The first is personal. The second is more related to our venue. As a poet, I feel like this whole time and sort of being forced into a new routine where I can't see friends as easily. I can't be social. I have, one or two friends that I see outside, and I'm very grateful, for that. I came to a point of there's no reason and no excuse not to focus on my poetry. Like I can use all those other things as an excuse, like this book that I've been working on for 10 years. If it's not going to become a book during this time, then when is it? If I'm not going to really finish this thing. So on a personal level, I obviously needed some kind of a constraint. Like you're going to have to be home for a year. I teach full time, but also clearly just much more time at home. Also, I would say that as a as a family, my husband and my kids and I, as many families have spent serious and intense time together that we haven't had ever. I mean, my son's 14, my daughter's 10. That's been a positive. Also, a shout out to Russ Grazier on here and PMAC and Johnny for being our kids' piano teacher, because they've been able to take piano lessons virtually since last March. And that's been amazing. And I hear my kids playing the piano all the time, which I feel like I probably wasn't slowing down to pay attention to even before. So that's been great. I think as a venue, we did a thing at the very beginning called Word Barn Sessions, which you can access on our website. And it's basically a combination of videos made by artists that have performed in the Word Barn and poets and fiction writers. And it was really emotional at first to watch these videos because everyone was just reacting, kind of like, here I am, I'm, Mark Orelli, and I've loved playing in the Word Barn, and I'm making this video in my kitchen, and am I going to be able to do this? And then he wrote a beautiful song and recorded it, and we were crying and just that. And it's, we've moved through we've made so much progress, I think, and we're in a hope. I'm saying we as a, the human race, we're in, I think, a better place. But it was that was also an intimate connection, because we weren't just hearing the performers on stage. We were experiencing this together virtually.
I think it touches on, both of you guys touch on this, that now it's been like a year, and we're not reacting, but rather like having a deep questioning of perception, right? Because our constraints have changed, our perception is changing. And like Jason, you talking about sort of doing like systematic thinking and letting yourself open up to see systems that you don't already know are there, I think is a great sort of is an inevitable psychological space for us to be in as right now. and a really interesting space creatively, socially moving forward to make new work and try to lay down new behavioral patterns for all of us. But that's sort of like the opportunity, or maybe I feel like everybody's talking about pivoting all last year, but I think there is this sort of natural, instead of the expectation of like, oh, how are you pivoting? And I'm like, terribly, straight downhill, but, now there's sort of a critical mass as a species, as a, like as humanity, like as you were saying, Sarah, that there actually is a pivot point coming. It feels like critical mass. And part of it is for those of us who think critically, like as I think is like the bedrock of all creativity in its different forms, of that we can feel that coming, and we're wondering, how do we do it in a really interesting way.
Vivian, you were talking earlier about being kind of solitary in your work, but being this kind of extroverted person that loves to be with people. And I feel like I've had a little bit of an opposite journey with that, where, much of my work has been made in collaboration with institutions like Prescott Park Arts Festival and Seacoast Rep and the Music Hall and things like that. And to have the absence of these institutions demanding like a certain need, Seacoast Rep asks me to choreograph 42nd Street. That's like a very specific creative parameter, right? Like that's not necessarily what me, Sarah Duclos, hopes and dreams and creativity like brings to the table. It's a very specific assignment. And I think what has happened for me this year in terms of, okay, some of it was cut out by necessity, just what we've had to do as a world to deal with this, like the needs of those institutions. But I've had to look at what does like me, solitary Sarah Duclos, as a choreographer, as an artist, actually want to do. And that's been both overwhelming and powerful to think about. And again, having that free time to chase after some opportunities that maybe I wouldn't have in the past, hasn't been mentioned on this call yet, but both Amanda and I were recently chosen as choreographers for the New England Now Artist cohort by New England Foundation for the Arts. And it's
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's going to be a huge opportunity for the both of us, and huge for dance in New Hampshire, I think, with what we're going to be able to share and bring back to the state. But it was a very involved application process and very lengthy. And I don't know, I can't speak for Amanda, but I actually applied twice because the program was supposed to happen during COVID and they ended up canceling it and saying, hey, like we're canceling it. Can you, reapply? And I was like, oh, God, these essay questions were just so in depth, like, oh, you have to do all of this again. And if I was running around to like 4 different institutions at once, I could very easily see me saying, oh, I don't have time for that, and now I've had the time for that because I've had this sort of whittling away of work and what work means this year. And work this year has meant investing my time into opportunities that benefit me, and that's okay.
So, like, do you all feel productive in these experiments, in these pivots, which the word pivot makes me want to vomit as a dancer, and all of this is too much pivoting, right? But do you feel productive?
I feel productive. Some days I feel productive. I mean, I feel like right now, looking back a year and thinking, wow, like there's, I think as an artist, I'm more productive now than I was a year ago, for sure. There's definitely a lot more determination and a lot more honesty with myself, as far as like what I'm interested in versus what I think other people might want to be interested in, which are probably not the same thing, but sort of gotten beyond that, and I don't really care so much anymore.
Yeah, I'd say that I feel productive, but I think it's also important. It has been important for me to maybe lower my expectations at times. Maybe there's a time where everything is overwhelming and I'm exhausted, because we all are. And I mean specifically exhausted from this situation of sort of where we are, and being okay with, I revised one line of a poem, and that's something, and not having some unrealistic expectation. And I think that, I've found that people, and it might be because of the series, the Maker series, and the different people we've interacted with, that people are finding all sorts of creative outlets that maybe they didn't anticipate, and that in itself fuels creativity. And I would say, to speak about Sarah Duclos, she is an example of somebody who has personally inspired me simply from her Instagram posts. And I am not a dancer, but her posts make me want to dance. And I think I can't be the only one having that, and I don't care, like I'll just dance, nobody's watching me. And, that's the point of it, I think. So I just think I think it's important not to have huge expectations of productivity, but notice when they're happening, and notice that, I just watched her 2-minute dance video, and I danced, and that brought me joy.
Oh, Sarah, thank you. That's so sweet. Yeah, to jump off of that, and I see all this like love for my Instagram in the sidebar. Thank you, everyone. That's so nice. And I feel it's interesting to think of that as work, because sometimes I think that I've used social media as like an escape from all of this. And I actually recently took a social media break because I was like, wow, like I don't have an audience, in a physical space with me. And that's where I get a lot of validation. And I think that I'm leaning too hard on, this thing and not being present in my real life. And I need to step back from this and reassess. And I wish that I was at peace with like what productivity looks at now. Like now, I wish I could add to the chorus of voices that the two of you just had, but I totally not, absolutely not. I do not feel productive. I feel like I'm pulling my hair out, going crazy, going like this. I've taught myself how to play chess. I've taught myself how to play the dulcimer. Like I'm like, give me something to do. Like I am just so used to, and this probably speaks to who I am as a person, but I'm always just so used to like, what's next? Okay, that show closed. What's next? What's the next project? Okay, I'm in rehearsal for 4 things at 5, once that, okay. Like, so that while slowing down has been positive for me in some of the other aspects that I've talked about, just having a system that's calibrated to being so go, 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 and to so drastically pull back from this, it's been such a massive adjustment that I have not 100% made.
So this is interesting actually, because Jennifer has a question in the chat, and it's in line with this conversation about using social media or digital tools, which makes your work more accessible globally, because your audience is literally unlimitless. But she wants to know, right, does that enter into your conscious mind, and is it daunting or inspirational? And I think, Sarah, you've just answered that question. And I know, Vivian, you've been starting on that journey using some of those tools. And a lot of our artist colleagues across the state have turned to systems like Patreon to help drive interest in their work and develop a revenue stream. So Vivian, you talk about that a little bit, and what's on your mind there with some of that media and that outreach in that world?
Sure. I always love thinking of, the term dynamo, like they were the sort of original kind of art pieces that turned into our eventual motor electricity generators, right? And I always think of in the creative process that there has to be like a sort of spinning energy to like get you riled up about something. And it's back to that idea of not only accountability, but like the biofeedback of creativity from other people. So, Sarah, when you're talking about what's the next thing, like I get it, where it's, I feel like especially in the last 5 years, or like say 10 years of my career, I was just sort of falling from project to project. Like I wasn't striding forward nobly or with any intent or plan about what was going on in my life. I was just sort of tumbling from project to project, barely getting it done, and then on to the next. And there is that creates that energy, right? You don't actually, once it's rolling, you don't need to get it rolling anymore. You just have to like survive the roll, right? And like right now, I feel like part of that conversation is, okay, the roll stopped, and now you, like the last year of that, sort of the reason that the word pivot makes you want to throw up beyond the dance implications is that everybody was talking about, hey, how are you going to pivot? Like you had to start the whole world within yourself again. And that was like stupid, because that's not, it's asking too much in a lot of ways. And I've been thinking of trying to recalibrate my brain of what I think social media is, because I think it can help me, not necessarily creating an environment where I need the positive feedback, but rather just giving a chance as an extrovert to feed off other people's excitement, which is different than that sort of unhealthy, oh my God, I'm worried about what I look like. And if somebody gives me a thumbs up, like I'm pumped about what I look like, not that sort of, dark path that we're very concerned about happening, especially with younger generations, but rather just, I like to see weird people doing weird things that they're really into. Like, that's what I love, because that makes me realize that what I do is absolutely awesome, right? Because I'm seeing that sort of dynamic, static electricity spinning in the world. And even if it has nothing to do with me, that gets me excited, and when somebody's, right, Sarah, like when people are like, oh my God, your Insta makes me want to dance, right? That is, you're like, oh, right, because dancing is a good idea, and it gives you the ability to move forward and make new things. And that's what I want. The social media, the Patreon, like the TikTok, that's what I want it to be. Come on. My bird is I got excited. Now my bird's yelling in the background. But so like, right? Like this sort of, that's what we need, because this expectation that as an artist, you alone create like that energy within yourself is like this Elizabethan falsehood of the dramatic, like tortured artist in the woods alone, which has always been false, right?
I'm really curious about that daunting versus inspirational, how the other artists feel about it, because for me, before the pandemic even hit, I was using social media as a tool in my work, and I was putting a lot of things online. But in what I do work for the stage, for theater and dance, all of a sudden, Broadway shut down, filming is shut down, and you have these like intensely qualified people who are all sitting at home, putting out dance classes, putting out videos, putting out things with all of these resources. And for me, it was very daunting all of a sudden to be like, this is a space that I once felt comfortable in. And now I'm having massive imposter syndrome because the best of the best in my industry are all out there doing the same thing. I don't know if any of the other artists felt that or have experienced that in different ways.
Yeah, I definitely did. I mean, before the pandemic, I was on social media, and my day job, as it were, is a web designer, and so I need to be on top of what the latest social media app is, and really engage with it in a way that is revealing part of myself that maybe most folks won't necessarily know. So yeah, I feel the same way. Before the pandemic, I was really involved in social media on my own front, but then also with the loading dock, and almost it's weird because it becomes like you have a split personality when you have more than one social media account. So I would want to post something, it's like, well, is this a loading dock thing, or is this a me 80R6 thing? And even the fact that when I started getting onto social media, back when I had like a normal day job, in e-commerce, as like my name being 80R6 felt like I was creating another personality that was separate from like my quote unquote professional work. And maybe just wanted to be sort of anonymous in the artistic things that I was doing online. And so back when Flickr was a thing, back when like the early Flickr, and so like it's funny how it like social media sort of separated my personalities, and that it's really not separate personalities, really it's just what channel I decide to funnel things into. And then once everyone started to flood onto social media and into streaming, my response personally was to also step back. But then also my response with the loading dock, which was, which is a DIY independent venue, was to not go down that path. And, that, I had a lot of folks that wanted me to, let's do a live stream series. Let's do like this, that, and the other thing. And in a way, I think I was still trying to process like what it all meant for me personally, but then for me as an arts presenter, like what does the medium mean, and how can we create something that is meaningful for our audience? And my answer was to not do anything, and which is doing something in itself. But I definitely stepped away from social media, with the live streams, and you're really trying to harness that.
There's also a real generational issue, which I touched on talking about it before, of that, as I think all of us are kind of in a similar age range where we're the ones that adopted technology, and we're already adults when social media, when Friendster first started flirting with us, right?
Long live
And I
Friendster.
remember, what's that?
Long live Friendster.
I mean, I remember I was in graduate school and going into the painting studio with my buddy, and he was sending Friendster messages to the guy in the next painting booth down. And I thought, you guys are crazy. What are you doing? You could just yell over the wall, right? And then it was interesting because I went back and did a sabbatical replacement for the design program. It's okay. And everything was about social media. A lot of people were saying, oh, is it weird to be back? Is it the same? And I'm like, no. I mean, post social media grad school is totally different because it's this, you see this encounter that you were talking about, Jason, of your public self and private self and how you sort that, you know, is something that we had to grow into. But it's something that's inherent for a younger generation. So I think they use it as a medium in a way that we aren't necessarily comfortable with, but I think can do something interesting that, shh, 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 shh. My bird's like, no, you haven't loved me yet. And I think that's the thing, as sort of adopters of technology, we're kind of seeing, we're starting to see the, you know, the sort of social fallout from that, you know, both positive and negative, but we're the ones that adopted it, you know, but it's not our native language. So that's why this is, I think this whole conversation would be radically different if we were, you know, talking to a group of people in their teens or 20s, that they, you know, be like, well, what are you even talking about? You just like, you know, put words down and like show pictures. I don't know what you're talking about. Because there's a sort of casualness where we were trained to represent and kind of create like a character. And it's just, I think it's something that we struggle with, like as a generation, you know.
It's also hard too because it's coming up, we're expected to give permission to come into those spaces. And it feels like every aspect of your life has to be performative for it to have value. And I think that that's been really, really challenging, especially when you're an artist and you so much about what you make is looked at critically, is the perception of individual art audience members are applied to your practice and or your product. And that's been extremely challenging when your process or your product, specifically for Sarah, DNI is your body, your actual body. So that's been, I think that this could be a whole nother conversation. It's interesting because I've given myself permission to say, no, I don't want to open myself on social media. That's just not where I want to be. And I don't know, there's many different ways of that. But one of the things, because we do need to wrap up today to respect everybody's time, I have been having conversations consistently over the past year about liveness in all of its different manifestations. And one of the things that people are missing is that live face-to-face experience with something. And I'm wondering if each of you might be able to recommend a live experience. It doesn't have to be art making that people could check out, do, or experience right now at the beginning of March. One for me is if you are anywhere in the state, you could come up to the Lakes region or the foothills of the White Mountains to check out Green Woodlands, which is a parcel of land that's privately owned, but that has been generously developed into the most epic snowshoeing, hiking, cross-country skiing, mountain biking area. If you come, you are sure to see wildlife. It's a beautiful, deep breath within your day. And that's something live and safe that you can partake in. Certainly inspirational.
I have something that I did the other day. I went to Enna Chocolate's Cafe in Exeter, New Hampshire. Anna Grazier's a fabulous chocolatier, and her chocolate is like a next level experience. And I ordered myself a hot cocoa, and I took a pot de creme home, and I bought a chocolate bar that I'm still eating because it has like pepper in it and it's so spicy. It's like the spiciest thing I've ever eaten in my life. I can only eat like 2 pieces of it at a time, but it's still so good. Yeah, I think that visceral feeling of like tasting something delicious, and their cafe is set up very safe, is a recent live experience that I've had lately that I've enjoyed.
I was going to recommend, it's similar to Amanda's. I was going to say we live right across from Rains Farm, and it's just a big 50-acre field owned by the town of Exeter, and lots of snowshoeing and sledding, and it's free and it's outside. And we live right across the street, so we'll come say hi to you. And then we really haven't left. I mean, I leave and then I come to school and then I go home. So I do go to school, but North Country Cider here in South, I teach in South Berwick. I recommend them, and they have a very good outdoor setup.
I really don't go anywhere at all. My studio is on the property. I like take 10 steps and then come back. But I think what is liberating and a luxury that we can all afford is to cook for ourselves. And probably the most fun thing I've done, in the last year, is I got a great trick for making naan breads in a mimicry of a tandoori oven on your gas grill. And that you roll out, get a recipe going. It's usually like kind of got a good yogurt base to it. Roll out the dough and you heat up an iron skillet right out on your grill, and you need like a burner outside, right? Heat up the iron skillet, put a little water on the back of the dough, and you throw it on the skillet, and that makes it stick, right? Just enough so that you can cook it for like 2 minutes, like with a lid on it, and then you flip it over and you hover it, and because of the water it sticks. You hover it over the flames, and that gives it that awesome bubbliness. If you're a garlic naan person like me, you've put like some garlic and butter on it, but because you're hovering it over the flames, it acts just like that tandoori oven where it's got that flame in the center, and dang, it's good. And you can do it if you have a grill.
I like that. I'm definitely going to try that. I think that cooking has become, I'm the one that cooks in the family. So definitely planning out or improvising meals has been aliveness for me. I guess the one thing that I've always been trying to and failing at making is kimchi. And my wife is Korean and requires a certain amount of kimchi, and the closest place that we can buy kimchi is down in the seacoast area, and it's like 2 hours away. And a jar of kimchi, even a big jar of kimchi, does not last long in our house. And I finally found a recipe that works, and that I just have a rotating jars of kimchi. They're fermenting or we're actively eating. And I also think, just to piggyback on what a lot of folks have already said, is getting outside is a feeling of liveness that, really can't be replicated. Doing anything outside. You can go to an amazing place, but really just taking a walk, and if it's inclement weather, enduring the weather. We have I live north of the Notch, near in Sugar Hill, and there's an organization called Ammonoosuc Conservation Trust. And one of the challenges the past year has been to find places to go hike or go walk that isn't totally overrun. Up in the North Country, a lot of our favorite swimming holes, secret hiking spots, secret backcountry snowboarding spots are all totally overrun. And Amanuset Conservation Trust has a bunch of incredible properties in the North Country with trails that are, between 2 and 3, 4 miles long, loops, and just incredible properties that are there to be checked out. I mean, I guess I'm sort of doing the opposite, which is like telling everyone my secret, but getting outside to some of these places has been a huge thing for me.
This is awesome. On behalf of the Arts Council and myself, I just want to say how much we appreciate you taking the time to be with us in conversation and share a little piece of you. It's really important for me, and I think also for our community. So I am so grateful. And if you all would oblige me for a moment, I think the one thing that we can all remember is that if we're not in control of anything else, we are in control of our breath, because our breath is the life force into our body. And so if you just take a moment to shake out your hands, relax your shoulders, take a deep breath in, feel the energy and the swirl of the breath float through the chest, and then exhale. And this time, one more breath, and feel that breath come from the base of your tailbone into your lower ribs, into your chest like a balloon, and let it out. And you can think about your head like a bobblehead. It floats on top of your spine. And there is absolutely no reason why your jaw has to be tense or your eyebrows need to be furrowed to do anything within your day to day. Yeah. So I hope you all have a beautiful weekend. Enjoy the sun. Get out and make something. Look all these people up. They're amazing. And I hope we all stay in touch. Take good care. Be well.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.